I'm your host, Sean MacKenzie, and today we are going to talk about Base64 and a little bit of the history and how to implement it in your Microsoft Access database so that you can store your specialized data in a nice way that can be pulled out and sent to other kinds of systems, and it will display and be rendered the same way as you put it in without any kind of changes along the way. So you might be wondering, well, what does that mean? And what are some examples of that? And some great examples include, if you want to put some XML inside of an XML document or some HTML inside of HTML, and you don't want it to be rendered by whatever system is going to open and look at it or whatever. Or you might be transferring data between Mac and Linux and Windows, where there are all kinds of considerations like line breaks, because those two systems or three systems, they look at line endings differently, and they also look at line breaks differently. Also, you might want to be able to send passwords that have all kinds of special characters in them, and you don't want the special characters to screw up processing along the way, and so you need a safe way to send those so that they can be rendered exactly the way that they're put in at the time that they were put in. Also, you might have language considerations, and you might want to have a very specific way of presenting the language and punctuation and things like that. And that's another example where you might be able to use Base64. So you might look at all the sort of gobbledygook that Base64 creates, and you might think, hey, that would be great for security. And actually, that's completely wrong. And actually, Base64 is intended to be easy to read by computer systems, any computer systems. And so, therefore, it is not a secure way to handle data, but it is a safe way of handling data in the sense that it is able to be read by all computer systems regardless of what kind of system they are. And you'll notice that it's actually not a more efficient way of sending the data either, because you'll find that most of the strings that are created using Base64 are actually quite a bit bigger than the strings that went into it. And so it's not really for efficiency, and it's not for security, it's for safety of your data and making it easy to read among all the different computer systems that might process it, look at it, or use it. And there's kind of a long history behind it about how some computer systems used 7-bit encoding, and some systems used 8-bit, and line endings would get truncated and all kinds of stuff. But for the purposes of today's video, what I'd like to emphasize is that this is a safe way to transfer the data so it doesn't get changed along the way, and that's what we're going to do. Let's get to it. Interested in supporting my work? Make sure to check out my Patreon. The link is in the description. Okay, so this is a pretty fun one today. I've created this little file here. Make sure to check out my downloads page. I'll upload this when I'm done. But you can see this is sort of a blank file here, and I'm going to create a new table. I'll just use that create ribbon, and I'll choose the table design, and then I'm just going to add an ID, and then I'm going to call this transfer text, since usually you'll be doing some sort of transfer if you're using Base64, but you might not be. It might be that some people are opening it on their systems and you want it to display a certain way, and so I will save that, and that's going to ask me if I want my primary key, and that's assigning it to that row there, that the first column, I should say, which is the ID, and that is going to give me a very simple table with a single field in it. It is a long text field, so that means I can put War and Peace in there if I want to, or I can just type a single line, and this is where we can sort of see how Base64 is going to work for us. So to see the kind of data that I'm going to put in, I'm going to expand. I expanded the row there, the row height and the width, so that you can see, and I'm just going to type some values in here. And in some of these I want to put in the kinds of things that cause screw ups when there's, you know, movement of data between processes and systems and things. And so I'm gonna take this next field here and I'm gonna, you know, put in some line breaks. So I'll say with line breaks in here, I think it's, so I need to use a control enter to do my line break. I almost forgot that. So I'm gonna put some with some and then line breaks, and I'll put the line breaks in there. So in Windows, it's a carriage return and a line feed, and which is character 13 and character 10. And then I'm going to take some XML here that I have in a notepad. I've got this XML, and maybe this is something I want to put into like an XML document for processing, but I don't want the XML to be rendered you know, by the XML system, because I'm actually just storing it in there. And this is very common. As you guys design systems, you're going to discover that these kinds of problems come up all the time. So I put in some HTML in there that has sort of HTML, and I'll put some JSON in there as well. There's a JSON, you know, so that's another one that can have some funkiness to it. And I'll add one more here in a second, which is a nice big long one, but you can sort of see there, you know, those are my text entries for this, and I'm just going to save that. I'll save that formatting that I did with the row height and everything. And then I'm going to go to the create ribbon, and I'm choosing the module, new module here, and that's going to give us a starting point. And I'm just saving that. I'm going to call it mod Base64, and that's going to give us a module to work with where we can create a Base64 function for encoding and a function for decoding, because we want to be able to go both ways, and that's what we're going to do here. Now I've gone to the tools and then references in my tools in my Visual Basic editor there, and I'm just going to scroll down to Microsoft XML 3.0, which is installed. This is a Windows 10 computer with Microsoft Office on it. You almost for sure will have that library in there. If not, you can get it. This is quite an old function, but it is very, very handy because Base64 has been around forever, and because of that, almost every system supports it, which is awesome. And most newer programming languages actually just have, you know, string.base64 or something like that included in them, so that you don't even need to build your own function. You can actually just use a built-in method of one of the objects available. And so, but Access does not have that, VBA does not have that, and so we're going to actually use this kind of workaround from the XML2 library, and it's very handy. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to, you know, create that function line. We're going to call it encode Base64, and that's going to be a byte as a return. It works in code very nicely. However, with your Microsoft Access expressions, it might not. You know, if you try to plunk this function into a query window or something like that, you might need to convert the output into an actual string first. But you'll see how this works as we go here. And we're just going to create an XML object and a node from the DOM document there. And basically, we're going to use one of the functions that's available in this older library that creates our Base64 for us, and we're going to do that now. We're going to create an array of bytes, and essentially we're going to fill the array with the output from this built-in function. Now there are other functions that you can use. I've seen some that actually, you know, do the full work of creating Base64 There's some neat ones that you can find online. And this one actually just uses the Microsoft libraries to do it for us. But be aware that there are other ways that you can do this if you would like to do it. Actually do the coding yourself of creating Base64. And so what we'll do is we're going to fill that array like I said. We're going to put our string data, that's our input argument there, and we're going to put that into the convert function, and then we're going to set the XML to a new msxml2.dom document, and then we'll use that node, and we're going to create an element of Base64, which will allow us to then use the node to convert it basically. And so that is kind of a funny workaround using this older library, but at least it works and it's available to us and it's installed on most computers, so you should have no problem connecting to that. So we'll use that. The data type is bin.base64, and then we'll use that node that has been converted into Base64, and we'll grab that byte array out of there, and then we'll set that as the value of our function. We'll return that value. So we'll say encode Base64 is equal to object node.text, and that is going to finish this function. We'll add a couple of cleanup items in here. We'll set the node equal to nothing and the XML object equal to nothing as well. And then what can we do? Well, we can go immediately to our immediate window, just like we have done in previous episodes. That's where we can run code on the fly just to test it out and things like that, or to get values off of forms. If we can't see them on the form, we can query the value here. And in this case, I'm going to say, what is the encode Base64 value for this isn't awesome. And you'll note that I put the question mark in front of the function because we're requesting the value, and there is the Base64 value for this is awesome exclamation mark. And you can see that it's very, very simple. You'll see that the string gets longer as I create a longer string to put into the function, and that makes sense. So if I hit enter there, you can see there is our Base64 value for this new string that I put in there. And in fact, the string will it should have a line break every 76 characters, I think it is. And so you'll see that creates that block of text that you saw at the very beginning of this video that I had in my introduction. If you put in a very long string, it actually makes it nice and neat, 76 across, and so it's very, very nice. It's a nice way to transfer data. It's very orderly, and like I said, it only uses those 64 ASCII characters, and therefore is very nice and easy to read by all kinds of different processes and things like that. And so once we created our encode function, well, we have to create a decode function, and we'll do kind of the same thing here. We'll do a decode Base64 function where we pass in a string into it. Now that could be a very large string, with many line breaks and things like that. It could be XML or HTML or just regular text, or all kinds of things. And it's going to return the byte array. And so what we want to do is we're going to do kind of the same thing. We're going to create that XML object from our DOM document, and then we're going to use that node again, just like we did before, but we're going to go the opposite way. And so we will create that node. We'll do the Base64, the B64 create element again, and then we'll set that data type again. Just like we did in the previous function, we're going to say it's a bin.base64 node, and then once we have a node, we'll set the text of our node equal to the data that's been put in. In this case, it will be base64 string that's being put in. So we're going to load that node with some base64, and then we'll return the value of the convert function from our node, and that will be the return value for our decode base64 function. So we're going to put in our Unicode in there, and that really does it. And then we'll set our objects to nothing to release the resources there, and then we've got ourselves a decode function for base64, and this is going to be very, very handy. And so there we go. We've got our encode function for base64 and our decode function for base64. So we can try that out now because we actually have some base64 already in our immediate window. We're going to go in a second here. We're going to convert all those values in the table, and that's going to be really cool. So make sure you stick around for that. So now I can go, what is the value, by using the question mark, and I'll use my decode base64, and I'll paste in that, oops, I got a line break on it. I'll paste in the string for the base64, and it's going to return to me, oh, got to have those question or equal marks on the end, and it's going to return to me the value that it was. So there we go. So this is awesome. I wonder how to decode this now. And so now we've got our original value back, which is exactly what we wanted to see. Now we can start to get into some interesting things when we really start sort of testing it. And so what I'll do here is I'm going to change that string that we put in, and now I'm going to put in a line break, which if you do this sort of if you pass in line breaks, it can actually break all kinds of stuff. But I've got a line break in this this string now, and you can see there's the base64 for it. It's all in one block, one together with no line breaks in it. And now I can say, hey, decode that thing that I just put in there, and you can see now there's a line break in the actual text that comes out. And so that's very, very handy. That's exactly what we want. We want to get that exact value back out again. And we're going to go ahead now. We're going to take a look at the values in this table. So here are here's the table that we created. We had some HTML and stuff in there. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look at encoding those values. And so now what we're going to do is we'll go into the design of that table, and we're going to add a new field that'll hold the base64 values for each of those entries there that you see. And we can do that just by going into the design, and we can add a new field onto the end. We'll call it transfer base64. It'll hold the transfer text for that. We'll make it a long text as well, because we're going to have some long values that will be longer than the short text capabilities there. And now what we can do is we're going to make a new function to just loop through that table and plug in the base64 values for that. Now you'll note that I don't use a update query or something like that for this. You could, you can't just plug this right into your query, the encode and decode, because they return byte arrays, but you can just run a little procedure over the table to plunk the translated values into the fields. And this procedure will be like 100 other ones you've seen me do of the same kind. And you guys are probably used to this by now. I'm going to just grab my database variable, and I'll get a record set variable. You might put dao.database up there, and you can specify that if you want. the string for our data. We'll create that as a string, and then we'll create a value for our base64, and then we can go ahead and we'll set that database equal to current database. At the end of our procedure, we will set it to nothing, and I'll just set our record set equal to the table name there that we had, table transfer, and that has the new field in it for the translation or the translated value. I'm just going to make sure that's the right name, and and then we can close our record set at the end. We're going to set the record set equal to nothing to release resources, and then we can do a quick little loop in the middle here, and we'll do a do until rst.eof, and we'll put a loop on the end, and then always make sure to put your move next as the last command in there, so that you don't have a never-ending loop and lock up your computer. What we'll do is we'll just say that our data that we created, that data variable, is equal to the record set and the field called transfer text, which holds the unconverted value, and then we'll make our base64 string equal to our function that we created called base64, or encode base64, and we're going to plug in our data into that and get the return value, which is all our base64, and then we'll go ahead and set the value of our transfer base64 field. We're going to set that equal to the base64 variable. We need to make sure actually to put an edit in here. So let's do that. You always have to put a rst.edit before you change values when you're doing an update through DAO here. So we'll do an edit and then an update after that statement. So that's going to hit that record in the loop, each record, and it's going to edit and update it. It's going to get that data string, and then it's going to convert it to the base64, and then we'll do an edit command to open up the record for editing. We'll set the value of the field, and then we're going to update that, and then we'll move to the next record. And that should do it. That's going to loop through our table. I'll just go and open our table just to show you. That's where the values are going to go into this transfer base64 field that you see here. So now we're going to have two columns in our table. One's going to have the original value, and the other is going to have the base64 value in it. And that is exactly what we want. So I'll put my cursor in there and check things out. I'm just going to, maybe at the end of this, I'll say done in our immediate window, just so we know that we're done when we're done. Copy that subroutine name. Subroutines don't return any value, so you can just paste it in. You don't have to put the question mark in front, and there you go. So put it in there, hit enter, got it done. Let's go check it out. So there you go. There's our base64 values. Check it out. Now those are all safe values. They can be transferred around with line breaks and all kinds of things in them, and special characters, and those kinds of things. And that's exactly what we want to see there. And if I create, say, a form, and I'll just use the wizard here just to demonstrate our output, and I'll call this FRM transfer, and you can see now if I close the navigation there, and now you can see the entire value for each of these. That one has line breaks in it, that one has XML, that one has HTML, some JSON. This one's a super long one that I pasted in, or not super long, but kind of long. That's from my downloads page. And you can see that's been converted into base64 as well. And so these could be transferred to other systems. They'll retain the, the carriage returns and all of those things, those kind of elements in there. And I'm going to copy that and I'll just paste it just so you can see. So that's what it looks like. So I copied the value of the converted paragraph that I put in, and you can see it has I believe it's 76 characters width, and it's very nice and neat, and it will maintain whatever you put in there. Will be maintained as it is processed by different systems. It won't be rendered or things like that. Now, there was a good example of a processing error. You guys may have caught it or may have missed it when I created the original values in the table. And you may have noticed that some formatting was lost on some of these items. If you know what it is, please put it in the comment section below. It is not related to the output from our function, but more a factor of how I put the data into the original table manually, and you'll see the kind of errors that happen when systems or programs handle data. Okay, so now that we have encoded all of our data and we've made it ready for transfer or whatever, we put it in our table as a value. We also want to be able to decode our Base64 data that either comes back or comes in from another system or was processed and sent over and we stored it. And how can we do that? Well, we can do it the same way that we encoded everything. We can loop through our table and we can get values and we can search on them or whatever. And so I'm actually just going to copy this function here, and I'm going to change a couple of things. I'm just going to switch around some of the variables, and it'll give us the decoded values from our table. And so I'll put a comment up here saying it's going to decode our table entries and show it to us. And so we've got our database set up. We're going to loop through the same table, except this time what we're going to do is we're going to take that Base64 value and we're going to load that. That's actually going to be the RST and the transfer Base64, I think it was called. And we'll put that value from the table on each row. We're going to put that into a variable. I'll cut that data out of there, and we're going to put that down below. Now we're going to say that our data, so the unencoded data, our text will actually be decode Base64, and we'll put in our Base64 instead, and that'll give us the value of each of the the Base64 values in our table. And we're not going to update our record set or anything this time around. Instead, what we're going to do is let's just put a message box. I think that'll be, so now we'll get a message box with each of the actual values decoded from Base64. We'll show that to the user in a message box, and we'll make that an OK only, and we'll put decoded on there so that we can see the values in the table. And so this will walk through our table just like our other subroutine did, and we'll do exactly the same thing. We'll copy that and we'll paste it into the immediate window to test it out. Decode it all and just hit enter, and there we go. There's our Base64, the first record. Second record is got that. We've got some line breaks in that one, got some XML in this one, and some HTML in this one. And then we got some JSON in here, and then a big paragraph was our last entry. And that's how you can encode and decode Base64 in Microsoft Access. Are you looking for more resources for your project? Make sure to check out the additional links in the description.